Alright, so I've been seeing an influx of a lot of new Gunpla builders over the last year, especially with the pandemic. So I decided to make a short video on the stuff that you'll need to get started, as well as some tips and tricks that might help you get the most out of your model building. So let's talk about levels of development first. So I've got 6 different levels of development in terms of the skill of the builder. So there's the newbie, the person who's never picked up a nipper, who's never built a Gundam. There's the beginner who starts experimenting with their Gundams, maybe trying a little hand painting or spray painting. Then we have the intermediate beginner, someone who will have maybe a portable airbrush or a full-size airbrush, learning the ropes. Then you have the intermediate builder who probably knows a few techniques, can probably do masking, maybe a little bit of reverse washes, more complicated things like that. Then you have the pros. These are the people who join those Gunpla competitions, and these are the people who win regularly. Now, I am nowhere near that level. I would say at best I'm an intermediate builder, but I'm pretty sure that I can help guide some of our newbies in starting in their hobby. So first up, let's talk about gear. Now I know gear can be expensive, and I know there's a lot of talk about gear on the different sites and different pages on Facebook. Well, there's actually one basic rule that you need to follow when it comes to gear. It's that you get what you pay for. If you're gonna get gear, you might as well just pay once and then maintain the equipment, instead of having to buy multiple pieces of the same gear over and over again. So let's start with gear. So you're going to need 1 or 2 nippers. So I have here 2 different nippers. This big one is for cutting the spruce from the big area, like the fatter area, not the part that's directly connected to the part. And this one, which is a fine-toothed one, is used to cut the part from the nub. Now, if you'll notice, this one's a little notched already, because this is the very first nipper that I ever got. And it's still in perfect working condition. All I had to do was just maintain it. Next, you'll need an X-Acto knife, or a hobby knife. Now, I know you're probably thinking this is kind of weird to have, but it's very important, especially if after you cut there are still nubs, like little tiny cut marks on the piece. You can use this to shave it off so you can get a nice flat surface. Another thing that's been very useful for me is a file. So there are some parts that you really can't get all of that extra plastic off, and a file is very useful for that and getting that flat finish. However, there is a certain technique in using it. You're going to have to go one way and then perpendicular after. That way you don't leave any of those straight line scratch marks that can really ruin the finish of your Gundam. Next, we have a small flathead screwdriver. Now, these are very common, and you're probably not going to use them to build the Gundam itself. However, it is very useful for prying apart 2 pieces of plastic, especially if you've connected the wrong pieces together. So I always keep one of these around to help me with that. Next up, we have tweezers. Now, the tweezers are usually used for small parts, but I normally just use them for stickers. That way I don't get any oil in the sticker, and it retains its stickiness when I put it on the Gundam. Next up, we have Gundam markers. You have black and you have gray. Now these are the most commonly used markers, and with one of each, you can probably panel line almost any Gundam. Then we have an eraser. Now, I use the eraser whenever I make a mistake when panel lining and I go over the line. All you need to do is just rub it with the eraser and it's gone. Some people do it with their fingers, but when it's dry, sometimes it's really hard to get out. So that's when an eraser really comes in handy. Next up, we have cutting mats. So I have two sizes here. One big one and one small one. Now you don't need multiple cutting mats. You can just do with one cutting mat. However, you're going to need that cutting mat because if you're going to be using the X-Acto knife, you might end up scratching your table. And that prevents that from happening. Next, you're going to need a marker pen. So I normally have one of these. Now, interestingly enough, the reason I use this is for marking the manual, where I pretty much last stopped when I was building. That way I don't forget. I don't forget where I stopped. And finally, you're going to need a garbage can, because you're always going to clean up after you build, and building Gundams is a very, well, messy experience, especially with like all the plastic and the nubs. Now you're gonna need some additional things for the tools you got. Basically, you're going to need some all-purpose oil. This is for keeping your nippers in good condition. Now just, every so often put some oil in the nipper and wipe off the excess and you're good. And you will also need extra blades for your X-Acto knife. Now I have those in storage, so I'm not going to be able to show them to you. But, they're not that expensive, and it always helps to have like a pack of 10. Last but not least, that's nice to have is some cement. Some Tamiya cement or some super glue. Why? Because inevitably, sometimes you're going to break parts. Whether you're too rough with it or you accidentally cut it. And the cement's going to help you build and rebuild that part, which, saves the kit. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the nice-to-haves. These aren't by any means essential, but they really make life a lot easier. So, first one would be a runner holder. Now, this is a normal dish rack, but I use it to hold my runners so that I can easily pick out the runners I need. Next up would be just a normal size tray. I normally put the cutting mat on the tray and then build on the tray. That way I can just wipe off like all the nubs, and at the end of my build, just dump it all in the trash. Problem solved, right? Now, all the equipment I've shown you is useful if you're going to be building without painting. And I'm assuming you're not going to be painting yet because, this is all new to you, and painting can be a very overwhelming experience, especially if you're still learning all the ropes. Now, it seems like a lot of equipment, it seems like a lot of gear, and I totally get that. But it is very important for you to have the exact tool for the job. Why? I cannot tell you the number of times when I was starting out where I wished I had a certain tool or a certain piece of equipment that could, make my life a lot easier. Sometimes, yeah, sure, you can make a hack or something, but you'll probably end up spending double or triple the time than you would have spent if you had the proper tool. I mean, let's be serious. You are not going to be able to build a Gundam model with this. You're not going to be able to cut nippers with this, spruce with this, or panel line with this. This is the wrong tool for the job. So, always get the right tool for the job, and get the best you can afford. All you need to do is do some maintenance, and you should be golden. Now, let's go over some tips. So, you've got all your equipment, you've got your kit. Alright, You're ready to build, right? Now you're just gonna need to remember a couple of things to make it a lot easier for you when you're building. So the first one would be to go as slow as you need. Building a Gundam is not a race. It never is. Unless of course, you're at that level where you're competing and you have a deadline or whatever. Maybe it's a commission work for somebody else. But at the beginner level, you're building because you just want to build something with your hands and it's fun. So go as slow as you need to. No one's rushing you. Make sure to take your time, go through the process, and enjoy. Alright, next one is something that I'm guilty of not following at times, but something that you should keep in mind is take a break every hour or so. Taking a break, standing up, getting the blood flowing. Number one, is good for your health, that's for sure. And number two, it helps you be a little more focused when you get back, which is kind of important when you're dealing with like the small details. Okay, third tip, start with Bandai kits. Now I know third-party kits are a lot cheaper. For some people, they're even more accessible. But the problem with third-party kits is sometimes they don't fit that well, which means you're going to have to file down the pegs. That's the first problem. And the second problem is the plastic quality. Now, sure, I build quite a number of third-party kits as well. But if you're starting out, try to get a Bandai kit. The plastic is really good and really sturdy. And the fit is perfect. That way, you won't have a hard time following the instructions. Okay, fourth tip. Have an organized workspace. Make sure you have an organized workspace. You know where everything is. You don't have everything just spread out. That way, when you need something, all you need to do is grab it. Makes things a lot easier. Okay, number 5. Make sure your workplace is well lit. Now, this is rather important, especially when you're dealing with like small parts and small details. You're going to want to see what you're filing, what you're cutting. And a good rule of thumb is really have it well lit so you can see everything. That way you also avoid any accidents like cutting yourself or, accidentally nipping yourself, because you can see exactly what you're doing. Alright, number 6. Never, and I mean never, jam 2 pieces together unless you're absolutely sure they are supposed to go together. Go over the manual repeatedly. I have made this mistake so many times, and I still make this mistake so many times. You don't need to force the parts to go together if you're building a Bandai kit. Make sure that they're actually supposed to go together, and then connect them. Just be sure to go over the manual. And, go over the manual well, read the instructions, and follow it to a T, and you should have no problems. Alright. For the next tip, have a small container for extra parts. Now, this is a little more applicable when you've got multiple kits already, and you just don't want to keep the boxes, or you want to fold the boxes. It's kind of hard to keep track of all of it, but if you still have just 1 or 2 kits, you can just keep the spare parts in the box, and that's fine too. Finally, you've got to clean up during and after every session, which means that you don't have empty runners just lying around, lots of knobs just lying around. Every so often, take some time to clean. This way, you don't lose parts, number 1, because sometimes nubs can actually look like a part if you're not paying attention well enough. And number 2, a clean workspace is a well-organized workspace, which means that you can easily get what you need. Alright, so I hope all these tips help you out, on your Gunpla journey. And I hope you tune in next time when I discuss other tips and tricks. as well as check out some of my build logs. Thank you and see you soon. Bye!